Welcome to this lecture on the evolution of scientific progress over the past 200 years. Today we will examine how the rate of discoveries has changed and whether our modern academic systems help or hinder innovation. Let's begin by looking at the 19th and early 20th centuries, often called the Golden Age of scientific discovery. During the 1800s and early 1900s, science was dominated by individual geniuses working with relatively simple equipment. Darwin revolutionized biology, Faraday and Maxwell transformed our understanding of electromagnetism, Tesla pioneered electrical engineering, Marie Curie discovered radioactivity, and Einstein reshaped physics. What made this era so productive? Let me outline the key characteristics. First, there were low barriers to entry. Scientists could conduct groundbreaking research with simple equipment in their homes or small laboratories. Funding requirements were minimal. Second, researchers could directly observe phenomena and experiment without needing approval from review committees or funding agencies. Third, publication was rapid. There were far fewer journals, and peer review was less formalized. Ideas could spread quickly through scientific societies and personal correspondence. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, scientists had the freedom to pursue unconventional ideas without fear of losing funding or tenure. Now let's examine the early to mid-20th century, when scientific progress accelerated dramatically. From 1900 to 1980, we witnessed an unprecedented explosion of knowledge. Quantum mechanics revolutionized our understanding of matter. Nuclear physics led to both energy and weapons. The structure of DNA was discovered, launching molecular biology. The space age began, and computing emerged as a transformative technology. The rate of discovery during this period was truly exponential. Major breakthroughs occurred every few years, sometimes every few months. So what enabled this incredible acceleration? This is a crucial question to understand. The answer lies largely in World War II and the subsequent Cold War. Governments poured massive resources into scientific research, viewing it as essential for national security and prestige. The Manhattan Project, which developed the atomic bomb, employed 130,000 people and cost $2 billion in 1940s money. This was science at an unprecedented scale. Similarly, NASA's Apollo program cost $25 billion and involved 400,000 workers. This level of coordination and funding had never been seen before in civilian science. Now let's turn to the modern era from 1980 to the present day. This is where our analysis becomes more nuanced and perhaps controversial. If we plot scientific output, measured by papers published versus truly revolutionary breakthroughs, we see an interesting divergence starting around 1980. The number of papers published has increased exponentially. In 1900, about 30,000 papers were published annually. By 2000, this had grown to over 1 million. Today it exceeds 3 million per year. However, the rate of truly revolutionary breakthroughs, discoveries that fundamentally reshape entire fields, has arguably plateaued or even declined. This raises a critical question. Why has productivity, measured in papers, increased while revolutionary impact has not kept pace? To answer this, we must examine the modern academic system that has evolved over the past 40 years. The modern academic system has become highly structured, with multiple layers of gatekeeping. Funding agencies with peer review panels control access to resources. Universities organize research into groups competing for these funds. Finally, journal peer review controls what gets published. This system has created what we call publish or perish culture. Researchers must constantly publish papers to secure funding, maintain positions, and advance their careers. Let me give you concrete numbers. In 1970, a researcher might need 5 to 10 significant papers to earn tenure at a major university. In 1970, 5 to 10 papers for tenure. By 2020, this had increased to 30 to 50 papers. That's a 5-fold increase. The result is an emphasis on quantity over quality. Researchers are incentivized to produce many incremental papers rather than pursue risky, potentially revolutionary ideas. Now let's examine the peer review system more closely. This is perhaps the most controversial aspect of modern science. Peer review was originally designed to ensure quality and rigor, Anonymous experts evaluate research before publication, checking methodology, logic, and significance. However, in practice, peer review often creates conformity and conservatism. Reviewers, who are typically established researchers, tend to favor work that aligns with existing paradigms. Radical ideas that challenge fundamental assumptions face systematic rejection. The very nature of peer review means that truly revolutionary work must convince skeptics within the existing framework. Let me give you a historical example. Barbara McClintock discovered genetic transposition, the idea that genes could move within chromosomes, in the 1940s. Her work was rejected by the scientific community for over 30 years because it contradicted the prevailing understanding of genetics. She finally received the Nobel Prize in 1983, decades after her discovery. This raises a provocative question. Would Barbara McClintock succeed in today's academic system? The answer is probably not. Without being able to publish her controversial findings, she would struggle to obtain funding. Without funding, she couldn't generate data. Without publications, she wouldn't receive tenure. The system would likely filter her out. Let's examine the funding problem in detail. This is where the modern system's flaws become most apparent. Modern grant applications require extensive preliminary data. You must essentially have already done much of the research to prove it's feasible. Success rates are brutally low. National Institutes of Health grants have acceptance rates of only 10 to 20%. Researchers now spend approximately 40% of their time writing grant applications rather than conducting research. This is a massive inefficiency. The system strongly favors safe, incremental projects over innovative, risky ones. Grant reviewers prefer proposals with guaranteed results. Let me offer an analogy to illustrate this problem. Compare academic funding to venture capital. Venture capital accepts high risk because they expect most investments to fail, but a few to succeed spectacularly. They make quick decisions and actively seek moonshot projects. Academic funding does the opposite. Risk is avoided, bureaucracy slows everything down, failure is punished, and incremental work is favored. This structural difference explains why technological innovation in industry often outpaces academic science, despite universities having brilliant researchers. Another major problem in modern science is the replication crisis. This has emerged primarily in the past 2 decades. Surveys show that over 70% of researchers have failed to reproduce another scientist's experiments. This is alarming. In psychology, less than 40% of published studies successfully replicate when others attempt to reproduce the results. In cancer biology, one major initiative found an 89% replication failure rate for landmark studies. So why is this replication crisis happening now? This is a crucial question for understanding modern science. The answer relates to pressure for positive, publishable results. Negative results, experiments that disprove hypotheses, are rarely published. This creates publication bias. Journals want exciting, positive results. Researchers know this and may consciously or unconsciously manipulate data or analysis to achieve publishable findings. P-hacking has become common. This is where researchers test multiple hypotheses or analysis methods until they find statistical significance, then report only that result. Career pressure makes this worse. Junior researchers need publications to survive. Senior researchers need grants to maintain their labs. Both face incentives to cut corners. Modern science also suffers from extreme specialization. This is both necessary and problematic. Scientific fields have become incredibly narrow. A researcher might spend their entire career studying one specific protein or one type of material. Experts in one subfield often cannot meaningfully communicate with experts in closely related subfields. The jargon and assumptions differ too much. Interdisciplinary work, where breakthroughs often occur, is systematically discouraged. It doesn't fit into departmental structures or funding categories. Compare this to historical scientists who were polymaths. Einstein contributed to quantum mechanics, relativity, statistical mechanics, and more. This breadth is nearly impossible today. Let me present a case study that shows both the potential and limitations of modern science. The discovery of CRISPR gene editing. CRISPR was discovered in 2012 by Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier. The technology developed rapidly, and they received the Nobel Prize in 2020, just 8 years later. This shows positive aspects of the modern system. Collaboration across labs and rapid sharing of methods through preprint servers accelerated development. However, CRISPR was built on decades of curiosity-driven research into bacterial immune systems, work that had no obvious application and would struggle to get funding today. The scientists who discovered the CRISPR system in bacteria in the 1980s and 90s were studying obscure mechanisms with no practical application. This type of pure curiosity research is increasingly difficult to fund. Let's examine some alternative models that have been more successful at fostering innovation. The Howard Hughes Medical Institute gives selected investigators long-term funding with minimal reporting requirements. They support the scientists, not specific projects. The results are impressive. HHMI investigators produce more high-impact discoveries per dollar spent than traditional grant-funded researchers. Historically, Bell Labs operated on a similar principle. They hired brilliant scientists and engineers, gave them resources and freedom, and didn't demand immediate practical results. Bell Labs produced the transistor, the laser, Unix operating system, C programming language, information theory, and countless other breakthroughs that shaped modern technology. The key insight is that freedom and long-term support enable breakthroughs. When researchers aren't constantly worried about the next grant or publication, they can think bigger. Modern science has become obsessed with metrics, and this has distorted incentives. Journal impact factor dominates prestige. Researchers are pressured to publish in high-impact journals regardless of whether that's the best venue for their work. Citation counts determine career advancement. But this metric rewards incremental work that many people build on, not revolutionary insights that may take years to appreciate. The H-index attempts to quantify researcher productivity, but it can be gamed and favors quantity over quality. All these metrics drive behavior away from risk-taking. A guaranteed paper in a medium journal is valued over a long shot at a major breakthrough that might fail. So we must ask, is the system getting worse? Or are we just noticing problems that always existed? Recent quantitative studies suggest a genuine decline in disruptive research. Papers today are more likely to incrementally build on existing work than to open new directions. We see fewer paradigm-shifting discoveries per researcher, despite far more total researchers and resources. The time from initial insight to practical application has increased significantly in many fields. Let me propose some potential solutions to these systemic problems. First, create dedicated high-risk funding pools. Perhaps 10 to 20% of research funding should explicitly support speculative, potentially transformative projects. Second, protect researchers from publication pressure early in their careers. Extend tenure clocks, reduce publication requirements, and value quality over quantity. Third, reform peer review to explicitly value innovation and risk-taking, not just technical correctness. Fourth, support interdisciplinary work structurally through funding mechanisms, departmental organization, and career paths. Fifth, celebrate and publish negative results. Failed experiments teach us what doesn't work, which is valuable information. Sixth, diversify funding sources and approaches. Don't rely solely on government grants with peer review. Philanthropic funding, prizes, and other models should play larger roles. Let's place this in broader context. What we're discussing isn't just about science. It's about how institutions evolve and calcify over time. Young fields, when first established, are dynamic and innovative. There are few rules, and pioneers can try radical approaches. As fields mature, they develop established practices, professional societies, and hierarchies. This brings stability, but also rigidity. Eventually, fields can become overmature, bureaucratic, and conservative. The system exists to perpetuate itself rather than to advance knowledge. Academic science, particularly in established fields, may be entering this overmature phase. The institutional structures built over the past 50 years now constrain more than they enable. However, there are encouraging signs that change is possible. Preprint servers like RX5 and BioRxiv allow scientists to share work immediately, bypassing traditional publication delays. Open access movements challenge the monopoly of commercial publishers who profit from freely provided research and peer review. Alternative funding models are emerging. Crowdfunding for science, focused research organizations, and philanthropic initiatives offer new paths. Young researchers increasingly question traditional career paths and are more willing to pursue alternative routes in industry or startups. Technology itself may disrupt the current system. Artificial intelligence tools are accelerating certain research tasks like literature review, data analysis, and hypothesis generation. Automation may reduce drudge work and free up time for creative thinking. New communication platforms enable global collaboration without traditional institutional barriers. However, technology alone won't fix the fundamental incentive problems. We still need structural reforms. Let me conclude with a clear position. The modern academic system needs significant reform. The evidence suggests that our current system, while producing vast quantities of research, actively inhibits transformative breakthroughs. We must find better ways to balance quality control with innovation, rigor with creativity, specialization with interdisciplinary thinking. The past 200 years show that institutions matter enormously. The same brilliant minds would produce very different results under different institutional structures. Reform is possible, but it requires collective will from funding agencies, universities, journals, and researchers themselves. The future trajectory of scientific progress depends on the choices we make about how to structure and support research. Let me leave you with some final thoughts to consider. Science is not just about discovery. It's about the social systems that enable or constrain discovery. The golden age of individual genius working alone may be over, but we can build systems that enable collective genius. We need both incremental progress that builds knowledge systematically and revolutionary breakthroughs that open entirely new domains. The question isn't whether science continues to progress, it's whether our institutional structures allow it to progress as rapidly and creatively as it could. Thank you for your attention to this important topic. The future of scientific discovery depends on our willingness to critically examine and reform the systems we've built.